Welcome back to the Sports Medicine Orthopod. My name is Anthony Yu. I'm joined again by our good friend, Dr. Drew Burleson, sports medicine specialist out of Beacon Ortho in Cincinnati. Drew, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. We just had a baby the other day. I'm feeling great. My wife is doing well. The baby's doing great. So we're just, on cloud nine over here.
And you're such a dedicated and honored guest of the Sports Medicine Orthopod that 2 days after your baby boy is born, here you are to share your insight about an NBA injury that actually hits once again. It seems like every time we have you on, we're talking about somebody from Ohio, some professional athlete that's hurt. And once again, here we are. Collin Sexton, guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Your team has a torn meniscus. And the interesting thing about this is, I think most people, when they hear meniscus tear, are thinking this needs surgery, particularly in the professional athlete population, because it is such a common injury in the knee and very commonly ends up with surgery. For example, James Wiseman, meniscus repair. He's waiting to come back to play any day now. But Collin Sexton, no word has been given about whether he's going to have surgery or not, how this is going to play out. And so right now it's kind of up in the air. I think he is working out a bit. And so when you hear that, kind of what are you thinking?
So, first of all, in Ohio, we lay it all on the line. We play to win, give it 100%. And that's just, may leave us susceptible to some injuries, that we don't want to have any regrets. But, in regards to Sexton, it is kind of surprising. Again, when you hear meniscus tears, especially in a high-level athlete, you're thinking, okay, well, they're going to have some type of surgery, whether it's, trimming up the portion of the meniscus or again, or trying to fix it, like you're talking about James Wiseman. I guess there's a couple things to think about. One is sometimes you can have meniscus tears and not necessarily even know it. I think we've equated this before to like a hangnail. Sometimes you have hangnails, you don't necessarily know you have them. Some of them you have are not painful. Some of them are painful. So I guess the first thing would be, he injured his knee. He got an MRI. Did the MRI findings actually correlate to what they found on his exam? Again, if they didn't, so let's say he had knee pain on the outside part of his knee and they got the MRI and it showed a tear on the inside part of his knee, and that doesn't correlate to the imaging findings. They might say, hey, this hurt you before, let's just rehab you and see how you do. The other thing, you have a very subtle, very small tear. Then you could theoretically try to rehab this, again, get back to playing with no problem. It's just, again, part of it depends on, what that tear looks like. There's numerous different types of tears you can have with the meniscus. I think we're obviously just speculating on this, but my biggest guess would be that it probably just is a very small meniscus tear that they think they may be able to rehab him and get back without any type of surgery.
Yeah. And so, for the benefit of our YouTube audience, I've got a knee here. I'm going to move the kneecap to the side. You can't do that in real life, but for the benefits of this anatomic lesson. So the menisci are these C-shaped discs in the middle of the knee. You have one here on the, let's see, here we go. Inside of the knee, outside of the knee. So we call those medial and lateral menisci respectively. And like you said, you can have all sorts of pattern of tear. It could be torn here on the periphery, and it could be torn sort of on the inner rim. And generally speaking, the blood supply for the meniscus, as well as the nerve supply, is really concentrated on the peripheral rims of the menisci themselves. The inner edges don't have much blood supply, don't have much nerve supply. And so, if it's a small tear, particularly on that inner rim, you may not really feel it. And like you said, there are people who have meniscus tears and they don't really have much pain or discomfort from them. And, obviously, you would think for an NBA player, they're not going to let him play with pain. So this might be something they think with a little rehab and a little bit of time and maybe some anti-inflammatory medication, that sort of thing, he can just sort of get over this acute phase of the injury, and then it will, stop hurting. And there is precedent for this, right? We've seen this recently with Joel Embiid, who was hurt during last year's playoff run. And then he missed a game. The Sixers advanced to the next round, and then he ended up playing the entire series against the Atlanta Hawks and didn't seem too impeded or hindered by that meniscus tear. And he's commented on it, I think, about a month ago, saying, his knee feels pretty good, and he seems to be playing just fine. So not all meniscus tears require surgery, but it is a very common injury that does. Would you be surprised if it turns out in a week or two we hear, what, Colin Sexton is going to end up having surgery?
No, I mean, I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, like it's almost more surprising to me that he's, again, given the time of the season right now, that he's not having surgery. Again, the Embiid one I can kind of understand a little bit because, it's the end of the season. You try to say, can we get him back for the playoffs? And then if we can, then we'll see how he does and potentially operate in the offseason. Being this early in the season, it is a little bit surprising to me that he's not having surgery right now. Again, I think I would only have to speculate that it's a very, very small tear, or maybe even an intra-substance tear, so that if you looked at it, it doesn't actually go to the joint surface. I feel like there's got to be some reason why he's not having surgery right now, but or hasn't had it already. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if in the next week or two he opts to have surgery.
Yeah, the intra-substance description is a good thing. That's kind of like a some abnormality we see on an MRI within the substance of the meniscus, but the structure of the meniscus itself is more or less intact. And so even if you were to go to surgery, it's not like you would change any of that. It's just something that kind of has to, heal on its own more or less with time. That in itself, kind of like talking about the meniscus healing itself. We've spoken about this many times on the show. Meniscus has a horrific blood supply, as we've mentioned, really only supplying that peripheral rim. And so they don't readily heal themselves. And so that's why, to you and me, when we hear meniscus tear, particularly an athlete, most of the time it is ending up in surgery. But, there are exceptions. Like you said, meniscus tears come in all sorts of degrees of severity, patterns, shapes, and sort of the location matters, how deep the tear is, where it is located, all that stuff matters. And so you're probably absolutely right. If they're giving him a chance to treat this non-operatively, it's probably not one, obviously, that's, in a crucial area of the meniscus that for somebody like you and me, we'd be saying we need to do surgery for this, 100%. And so, the timetable for this is very up in the air right now. And I would say if he continues to treat this non-operatively without surgery, it's going to be quite variable. It could be he feels pretty good in a month. It could be he feels pretty good in 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Who knows? It'll be very subjective, and there is no textbook timetable for when he could come back. And if anybody's followed the NBA over the last 5 years, the Cavs are going to be very cautious with him. But let's say he goes to surgery. What would you expect the timetable for return if he ends up having surgery? It
depends on what they do with the meniscus. So again, you can either fix it or you can trim out a portion of it. So if it gets fixed, you're looking at least the end of the season. I wouldn't see him come. If he has his meniscus repaired, I don't see him coming back the rest of the season. Even for trimming out a portion, there's some precedent with Zion Williamson, who was out for multiple months with that. I would say that's an abnormality. It's typically a lot sooner than that. I would say a couple months probably if he were to have this cut out or just have a meniscectomy. There's even precedent as early as there's people who come back within a week. I can remember JT Barrett for Ohio State. He tore his meniscus the week before they played Michigan. This has been obviously years ago. And he played the next week against Michigan. So, again, like people, I wouldn't anticipate him coming back that quickly. But, again, somewhere in the time frame of 4 to 6 weeks probably if he has it, a portion of it cut out.
Yeah, and so, again, we don't want to belabor this point because we've spoken about it many times on the show before, but the function of the meniscus, the main one is to be a shock absorber. You remember looking at that anatomic model, it lives in between the femur, the thigh bone, and the tibia, the shin bone. Its job is to cushion the cartilage that caps the ends of those bones in the knee joint. And so there are some long-term ramifications. Nobody right now is thinking about the long-term ramifications of Colin Sexton's knee. They're thinking about the here and now. But, if for anybody with a meniscus tear, potentially facing a surgery where the meniscus might be repaired or what you call kind of trimmed out, resected, what we call partial meniscectomy, there are some long-term ramifications to think about. If you are trimming it out, nice, easy, simple recovery, can get back on the court pretty quickly, but there may be a price to pay in that the knee may be set up to develop arthritis, aka cartilage damage at an earlier age. The opposite's true of meniscus repair. James Wiseman got a meniscus repair. He's been out for a really long time. I think he got it towards meniscus with like 20 games left in the season. He still is not back on the court. That was a long time ago. And so it really is, a 6+ month recovery to get back on the court. But the reason to do that is to try to preserve the meniscus as a shock absorber to prevent prevent long-term damage, long-term consequences with arthritis. And ultimately, Drew, as you and I know, the pattern of that tear dictates everything for us from the surgical side. Like we can make predictions, and for somebody like Colin Sexton, if he had a really bad meniscus tear, we would hopefully be able to fix it so that we could protect his knee for the long term. But you never really know until you put that camera inside the knee and actually look at it. And the meniscus, it's like you're like the meniscus whisperer. It's going to talk to you and tell you, this is what you can do with me, this is what you cannot do with me, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say 95% of the time, it's not even debatable what you do with it. There are a few select cases where you're like, man, I don't know if I should fix this or if I should cut it out, but those cases are a little bit fewer and further between. So I mean, yeah, like you said, like the meniscus really will say very clearly, what needs to be done, where the tear is, what the pattern's like. Again, are you going to trim it out? Are you going to try to put some sutures in there and fix it? It's going to tell you what needs to be done.
Right. Well, we'll cross our fingers that he's able to treat this without surgery, because that would probably mean that the quickest return back to the court, and that his meniscus is not compromised in any severe way that would necessitate something like a surgery, similar to Joel Embiid. But I'm with you. If we hear in a week or two that he's going to end up going for surgery, we won't really be surprised. But, Cavs are looking good. Not quite as good as my Golden State Warriors, but, everybody can dare to dream. But the Cavs, for the expectations going into the season, I think they've already exceeded them, and it's exciting to see, Cleveland basketball kind of on the rise again. Absolutely. I mean, again, I think that they've absolutely far exceeded any sort of expectations. Those expectations being very, very low is why. But no, it's been fun. It's been good to watch this year. Not quite as fun as the LeBron days, but it's been good. Yeah. All right, Drew. Well, congratulations, Pops. Sending you well wishes, sending your wife well wishes while you do this podcast, while she's doing God knows what with 3 children. Thanks a lot for listening, everyone. Please hit subscribe, give us a like, comments. We appreciate it all. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Hey, folks. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, please subscribe, like, and share. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have a question about today's show, or you, a loved one, or maybe your favorite athlete has sustained a sports medicine injury that you would like to know more about, please reach out to us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or email. And stay tuned for more exciting content from the Sports Medicine Orthopod. Thanks again.